David, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. I'm the president of Geisler International Ministries. It's a ministry I started with my father, who went home to be with the Lord 3 years ago. We started that in 2015, but I've been actually a missionary both in the East and the West for about 25, 30 years. And, my training is in apologetics and evangelism, and I teach a doctoral class at two schools that my father started, Southern Evangelical Seminary and Veritas International University, which used to be Veritas Evangelical Seminary. And I teach people how to use apologetics in conversing with people, but not in a way that, you just end up in an argument, but a conversation. Yeah. Kind of like what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. So the topic today was arguments for the Christian God, and you were kind enough to send me your father's book, which I read through. So could you give me a brief outline of what his main arguments are in the book so we can talk about them?
Okay, so I was wondering if before we did that, if I could just ask you a few questions, because I've seen a few of your YouTube videos and I wasn't really even clear what it is that you believe. Could I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
So that we can find out like how much common ground do we have? So my first question is, would you agree, yes or no, if an intelligent, all-powerful creator exists, that he or she could communicate effectively their concerns to us? I'm not saying at this point, I'm not trying to get you to say that there is a creator. I'm just saying that if there is a creator, that this creator could probably communicate their concerns to us.
Probably, sure.
Yeah, I mean, the universe is 4% visible, right? 23% undetectable, and the known universe is what? 94 billion light years across. So if we do have a creator and he did create all of this, then that's powerful. I mean, it has to be someone who has lots of power and understands a lot of things to be able to do that. Is that something you would agree with as well, or not?
Sure. Most likely. I mean, I'd say that if we assume it's a conscious mind and how we think conscious minds go about creating things, it would probably need some kind of intentionality and ability to use the power it has via that intentionality. Of course, yes. I think it probably isn't a conscious mind there, but yes, if it does have one and it's rational to assume it has some level of intentionality and power.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Question number 2. Would you agree that truth exists? Like you exist, I exist, that's a truth, right?
Well, yes, but I think truth is a property of sentences. So like the sentence 1 + 1 = 2 is true, but like there isn't, like, if I said, is the table true? Like, no, the table doesn't have any kind of property of truth in it.
Okay, so like if I said to you, my wife is either pregnant or non-pregnant, that's a true statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, and you exist, that's a truth.
Yep. But I do want to clarify, I wouldn't say truth exists. I'd say there are things that exist, and those things can be described with sentences, and the sentences are true. So truth is a property of sentences. But I don't think truth exists as a property anywhere.
Okay, so my next question is, would you agree that truth can be expressed in propositional statements?
Sure.
Yeah, like you exist, I exist. Okay. Would you agree that truth can be defined as that which corresponds to reality?
Yep.
Okay. Would you agree that if an intelligent creator does exist, then miracles are certainly possible?
That one I'd give a 50-50.
Okay, so let me clarify why I'm asking you this and see if by clarifying this, it helps you to understand better what I'm trying to get at here. The way my father taught me these issues is a miracle is an act of God. If God exists, he certainly can act, correct?
That one I'd also kind of give a 50-50. Well, because there could be like a deistic kind of a God who could only act.
Well, wait. I'm not, okay. But a deistic God, here's the problem with deism. Deism, they believe the big miracle, a deist will believe the big miracle that God created the universe out of nothing, but they don't believe the little miracles that God can intervene in the world. And that's the problem I have with deism.
Well, I was just giving you a general answer. So if I grant the argument God exists, do I think that he can do miracles? Maybe,
yeah.
maybe not.
Okay, so if a theistic God exists, then would you grant that miracles are certainly possible?
Nope, I'd do the same thing. It's possible yes and possible no. It's like a 50-50.
I don't understand why it would even be a 50-50. Could you just clarify that for me a little better? This is really helpful for me because it helps me to understand, what your metaphysics, what your epistemology, help me know how to have an actual conversation with you.
Yeah, so I think if we grant a theistic God exists, that doesn't tell us anything about its properties. So its nature could be such that it can't do miracles. That would be perfectly fine. But its nature could be such that it can do miracles. It may be such the case that it only obeys or allows the laws of physics to govern the universe and never violates the laws of physics. It could be the case that it does violate the laws of physics. It could be the case that miracles aren't even a violation of the laws of physics. And so because we don't know anything about the God, we can't say whether or not miracles are or are not possible.
Okay, so let's just say this theistic God is infinitely powerful. If he is infinitely powerful, does he then have the ability to do miracles?
Still don't know, because infinitely powerful is contextual. Like you would say God is, I would imagine you'd say God can't violate the laws of logic, right? So there's limits to the power.
Well, you can't either. You can't violate the laws of logic either, right?
Right, but that's not. So the question here was that there are limits. Infinite power doesn't mean can do literally anything. There are limits to it, and so even if something is infinitely powerful, one sec. Let me finish. So even if something is infinitely powerful, it may have limits that it cannot violate the laws of physics or something because of its part of its nature. If it can't violate its own nature, and in its nature it states it can't violate the physics.
Now you're confusing operational laws and origin laws. Just because I can explain the operational laws in terms of the universe doesn't mean I can explain the origin laws, like the origin of the universe.
Well, that's a different question. So the question here is, if we grant God exists and if we grant he's infinitely powerful, does that mean he can do miracles? No. It is possible that even if God exists and he is infinitely powerful, he could have a nature such that doing miracles violates his constitution of his nature, which would be a logical contradiction. He wouldn't be able to do that. So even if God exists and he's all powerful, that does not.
Okay, but that's a hypothetical. Why would it violate his nature to do miracles? I'm trying to pin you down here.
Well, this is why it's a 50-50. There's a 50% chance it is a part of his nature that he cannot do that, and it's a 50% chance that it's not a part of his nature that he can do that. So because we don't have any information about the God's nature, whether it does or does not have this property, then it's a 50% yes or 50% no.
So if I can demonstrate to you that not only is there an infinite power, that this power is infinitely moral, infinitely intelligent, right? Would that then help you to see then that miracles are possible?
Well, I mean, miracles are possible, but I wouldn't say it's necessary. So it's like 50% miracles can happen.
Okay, he doesn't have to do a miracle. Oh, no, God doesn't have to do anything. Right. I mean, I agree with you on that one. That God doesn't have to do anything. But if he chooses to, he can do something supernatural, like rise someone from the dead, or pass on his word to us using imperfect people.
I'm going a little bit further than that. I'm saying that it's possible God's nature would make miracles impossible. It's possible that if God exists and he's all powerful, he may be completely impossible to do miracles. But it's possible that he doesn't have that part of his nature, so he could do miracles. So it's a 50-50 whether miracles are possible if God exists.
So why would it be impossible for God to do miracles because of his power? I don't understand.
Is it possible for God to lie?
No. See, God can't do anything that's contrary to his nature.
Right.
Yes.
So if his nature is such that he cannot violate the laws of physics, then he cannot do anything that would violate the laws of physics, which would mean he couldn't do a miracle that would violate the laws of physics.
Okay, so when we see miracles, we don't see that there's a violation of a mirror of the laws of physics. We see like gravity, um, like when you fly in a plane, you're not violating the laws of gravity. There's other laws, right, that supersede that. So I would
Right,
see
just to
God.
clarify, I don't mean violation as in he's literally breaking physics. I mean, like, if God
Yeah.
is intervening in physics in any way to change anything in reality that wasn't a result of the Big Bang physics, then that may be a violation of his nature. His nature may be such that he cannot intervene in the universe after its initial starting conditions. Therefore, it may be impossible for him to do miracles because it may be impossible for him to intervene in the universe after its creation in any way.
Okay, so but he couldn't intervene because of his nature. I'm trying to understand why you think miracles are not possible uh, for an all-powerful God. Why can't he intervene if he set certain physical laws up? Like, for example, what people believe about the Big Bang, they believe that everything came to a single point, but at that point, all the laws of physics break down, don't they? At that point of singularity, that's what
Um,
that's what I've been told by a lot of science guys, that when you get to that point of singularity, all the laws of physics break down because you're saying that nothing created something.
Well, no, the reason they break down is because the range in which they can be calculated is like a ruler. Ruler can only work to some degree of accuracy. And so it's not that they literally stop working, it's that our just calculations don't have that degree of accuracy. But that's a different topic. My point here is that the reason miracles would be impossible is if God's nature is such that he cannot intervene or change anything in physical laws because that's just what his nature is, then it would be impossible for him to do anything that would affect those laws. So let's say to help you find your car keys or something. Like if to help you find your car keys, he has to do something in your brain which would affect the way physics works. It would like move quantum mechanical particles in your brain or whatever to cause you to realize this is where your car keys is.
Well,
And
you
it's
can't
his
violate
nature.
your will, right?
Well, that's a different topic. So the point here is that he can't, in his nature, change anything or do anything that would affect any laws of physics. In which case, he can do no miracles because he can't do anything to affect the laws of physics or change the laws of physics in any way. And
Okay, but if
so
he created the laws of physics, don't you think he can suspend the laws of physics?
it's a
Just like
50-50.
we do when we fly in an airplane.
It's
We
50-50.
suspend the laws of gravity.
It's 50-50. So it could be that God's nature cannot do that, and it could be that God's nature could do that. It's 50-50.
Okay, so you're just admitting the possibility that God could do miracles, not necessarily that you know for certain he actually could.
Well, it's possible God could, and it's possible God cannot. So it's
Okay.
both
All
are
right.
possible.
All right. Well, I don't want to argue that point because it's a minor point. All right. So let me ask you some more questions. Would you agree that no evidence is self-interpreting, that we look at evidence through a worldview framework?
Well, evidence on its own doesn't have an interpretation. So we have
Okay.
interpretations of
Right.
evidence,
Right.
but evidence on its own.
Let me give you a couple examples from my experience. One day I was on a college campus. I was talking to a Hindu student, and I was using Josh McDowell's little book, More Than a Carpenter, to talk about the evidence for the resurrection. And after I gave her all that evidence, she looked me right in the eye and said, I believe we all have the power to do what Jesus did. So what was she doing? She was taking that evidence that I shared with her and reinterpreting it through her worldview of pantheism. So your worldview will color your conclusions. Yes or no?
Sort of. So I think people's worldviews will interpret their conclusions, but there is an objectively correct way to interpret evidence. independent of worldviews. So like if you say 1 + 1 = 2, you're right. If calculator just says 1 + 1 does the calculations equals 2, it's right, independent of any worldview. And so even if you may have a worldview that you may disagree with that or interpret it differently, like if you believe in a non-standard logic or something, you would just be wrong. So your worldview is independent of the truth of the evidence, and it's independent of the rational syllogism that leads to the conclusion. So your worldview really doesn't make any difference to whether or not the argument is rational or not. That can be verified independent of any worldview.
Well, wait. You're not answering my question. A worldview is like a lens. If you have green lenses, everything's going to look green. If you have pink lenses, everything's going to look pink. And the problem is, if no evidence is self-interpreting, then we come and look at that evidence through a worldview framework, whether it's theism, pantheism, or atheism or naturalism. Let me give you an example.
So I'm saying no. I'm saying that's wrong. I'm saying evidence is self-interpreting. So if I see one rock and then see another rock and say that's two rocks, that statement is correct, independent of any worldview. Worldviews don't matter here. It's relevant. If a computer looks at one rock, sees another rock, says there's two rocks, it's correct. Worldviews don't matter. Computers don't have worldviews as far as I know. They just calculate the data. So evidence itself is independent of worldviews. Now we have biases, and our biases can affect how we interpret data, but there is a truth there independent of worldviews. Worldviews make no difference to 1 + 1 = 2.
Okay, so let me try one more time. William Lane Craig, in a debate with Bart Ehrman, Bart Ehrman said this to William Lane Craig, that it's more likely that Jesus had a twin brother than that Jesus actually rose from the dead. But if theism is true, if there is a theistic God, then it may not be more likely that Jesus had a twin brother, and especially because his half-brother James was not a believer all throughout his life until after the empty tomb.
Well, there is an objectively correct answer to that, independent of worldview. So like if say we have no evidence that any resurrection or miracles could happen. Say we do have lots of evidence of bereavement delusions or something, and there is a phenomenon of someone claiming to have seen a dead loved one. The only rational conclusion is to say it's a bereavement delusion. It's completely irrational to say that there's miracles unless you have some independent evidence of this God existing.
Well, if you've already demonstrated there's a theistic God, then you're wrong.
Right. So that was the last thing I said. The last thing I said is if you already have independent evidence of God, then you can say that that's rational. But if you don't, then it's always necessarily irrational, independent of worldview.
Okay, so that's why I'm saying that we look at evidence through a worldview framework, whether it's theistic, naturalism, or pantheistic. That helps us to understand how to interpret that data.
Well, no, that's incorrect. So epistemologies can assess data independent of ontologies. So your ontology of what you think the world is, theism, atheism, pantheism, any of those things, are completely independent of the evidence and whether or not the evidence justifies.
Okay, but your worldview will color your conclusions. I remember
it can, but it doesn't.
Okay, in the conversation that Anthony Flew had with Gary Habermas in their second debate, Anthony Flew said to Gary Habermas, your evidence for Jesus is little, but he then concluded later on that if you have already demonstrated for me that there is evidence for a theistic God, then your evidence for Christianity would actually be stronger. And this is before Anthony Flew gave up his atheism. He was talking like this before he actually gave up his atheism because of the conclusions he came to.
Well, he was a deist, so he became a theist. But like I said, your worldview can.
He gave up his
your worldview can bias you. People can be biased, but that's irrelevant. Not everyone is biased.
So
their evidence
can color your conclusions,
yes,
correct?
It can.
All
but
right.
the evidence can be assessed from an epistemic standpoint.
I'll just stop with that and keep moving on. Would you agree, and I think you would, that God's existence is not rationally inescapable? Okay, so let me clarify. because a lot of people don't understand this. A lot of people think that, like my father's position in classical apologetics, that's a rationally inescapable argument. Okay, so for something to be rationally inescapable, it means that for its opposite to be true, it would have to be a contradiction. That's what rational inescapability means. That means for its opposite to be true, it would have to be a contradiction. But there's no logical contradiction in saying that nothing ever existed, including God. Now, it's actually undeniable that I exist, right? But there's
Sure.
nothing logically, like it could be, it's logically possible that nothing ever existed, including you and I or God. Is that logically possible?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want you to understand, when I get to the argument, I'm not saying that God's existence is rationally inescapable. What I am saying is, once you and I admit that something exists, we start with reality, then God's existence is rationally inescapable. And I'll try to show you how that's true. But I'm saying that it's not merely an ontological kind of argument. I'm not giving you an ontological argument for God's existence, because I believe the ontological argument has to piggyback on the cosmological, and so the moral and the teleological also have to piggyback on the cosmological argument. And that's
Could you say that one more time? I think you
Yes.
said something like, if reality exists, God exists, or if reality exists, it's inescapable that God exists, or something like
Yes.
that?
If you and I exist, it is rationally inescapable that a theistic God must exist.
So is it specifically us, or is it specifically our existence? If we exist, therefore God exists, or is it if reality exists, God exists?
No. If you exist,
Okay, gotcha.
If you exist, then therefore God's existence is rationally inescapable. If I exist, then God's existence is rationally inescapable. And then you can add those attributes, because then you add the moral, the teleological, the ontological argument to the cosmological. My father would say you piggyback these arguments on the cosmological, and then you can get a better feel. Not feel, that's the wrong word. You get a better understanding of God's attributes. That's the argument. I just wanted you to understand what the argument is not, and that's why going through these questions, I think, at least will help you to understand what it is I'm trying to say. All right.
Sure.
Okay. Question 8. Would you agree that there's a difference between an instrumental cause and an efficient cause?
I think those would be dependent on how you use those terms. So
Okay,
maybe.
so let me give you analogies to show you what I'm getting at here. Your parents are the instrumental cause of your existence. True?
Okay, I still know what you mean by the term exactly.
Okay, wait. So let me keep going. But your parents are not the efficient cause of your existence, because when they die, you don't die, right? So if I said to you that I have a hammer and a nail and a board, the hammer is the instrumental cause of the nail going into the board. But what's the efficient cause? The efficient cause is me. I'm the efficient cause, because I'm using the hammer. The hammer is the instrumental cause. This is Aristotle. Aristotle talked about the distinction between efficient causality and instrumental causality. He also talked about final causality and all these things. But interestingly enough, Aristotle talked about the unmoved mover, but that's as far as he got. He never got any further than that there is this unmoved mover of everything in the universe, but didn't get him to Christianity.
To clarify, you mentioned that the efficient cause, you gave an example of, if my parents stopped existing, I wouldn't stop existing, therefore they are not the efficient cause. Is that
right? They're only an instrumental cause of of your
Right.
existence.
So you, if you stopped existing, the hammer and the nail would still exist. So you would still be an instrumental cause, wouldn't you?
What do you mean? I'm not following you.
So when you said my parents are an instrumental cause of me, because if my parents
Right,
stop existing, I would not stop existing. That would mean that
right.
if you hammered a nail into a board or whatever, if you stopped existing, the nail and
Right.
the board would still be there. It would still exist. And so just like if my parents stopped existing, I would still exist. If
Analogies
you,
break down. Analogies break down. Analogies aren't perfect. And so when you're talking about a necessary being and contingent beings, that's when the analogy breaks down. So you can't make that analogy walk on all fours. I'm just trying to say that the hammer is the instrumental cause, a nail going in the board. I'm not talking about whether that hammer can make that nail continue to exist, whatever. That's not the issue, because the hammer is the instrumental cause. Now, in the illustration, I'm still a contingent being, so that's why that analogy is not. I'm just trying to get you to see that when people say, "Well, we don't need a cause for our current existence," they're not understanding the argument of efficient causality, that you
well,
need
so
not
just to
only
clarify,
efficient causality, but you
I want
need
to
a current.
clarify, by
Yes,
efficient, do you mean something that sustains the existence of? So like for
yes,
a hammer
yes.
and nail, space and time are the efficient cause, because if space of time disappeared, the
Okay,
hammer and nail
so
would disappear.
if I have let me just use the analogy. If I have the potential for existence, the only thing that can actualize my existence is something actual. And the only way to do this is if something were pure actuality. Exodus 3:14, John 8:58. I am. God is existence. God's existence, essence is that he exists. So that's when you get into explaining the difference between necessary cause and contingent cause.
Well,
And
so
so that
I don't accept.
analogy breaks down. I'm just trying to say that instrumental cause and efficient cause are different. And an efficient cause is something that can move something from a state of potentiality to actuality. So, like if I have existence and I'm a contingent being, then something has to sustain my existence. Actually, when we get down to the argument, it'll be a little more clear than what I'm saying now.
Right. So what would have helped is if you just gave a definition of what you mean by efficient cause versus instrumental cause. Like just give a definition of each of those terms. I don't accept actuality versus potentiality. I think those are fictional properties that don't correspond to anything in reality. I think pure actuality is like pure tallness. It's just an abstract. There's no such thing. It can't possibly exist. Or like pure motion. You can't have pure motion. You have to have an object to move. You can't have pure actuality. You have to have an object to exist. And so you can't, pure actuality is as nonsensical as pure motion. So I don't
Well,
grant
yeah,
those things exist.
but you would admit that if a bucket has a potential to be filled with water, it has to be filled by something that's actual, like a person. A person can fill water into a bucket, but that potential for that bucket to be filled with water cannot actualize itself. In a similar way, if I have potential existence, but not actual existence, something has to give me existence. Colossians
No, I wouldn't
15
grant that
says,
because
in him, all things hold together. That God holds us into existence. So we have a
so no, I
beginning.
would not grant that. I would not,
Current.
because in the
Okay.
consensus in
Okay.
physics,
Hold on. Hold on.
just to,
Sure.
I just wanted a brief thing. In
Sure.
physics, the consensus is that virtual particles can come into existence from nothing, essentially, and so things don't need an
Okay. So
actualized cause.
wait. That's not true. Because I knew you were going to bring this up. So I did some research. I'm not really much into physics, but my understanding in physics is there's a lot of different theories, and no one has come up with a uniform explanation for all the things that we can explain in physics. So there's not
Yeah.
this understanding that that everything is uncaused in physics, and so therefore we don't need to ask for a cause for God.
So just to clarify, that's not what I said. The consensus in physics is that randomness is an irreducible fundamental force in physics that is not caused by anything else. That is the consensus. We don't know what fundamental explanation is relating to this, but the consensus of physicists is that randomness is irreducible. It is a fundamental thing in physics. You can check the paper Foundational Attitudes Towards Quantum Mechanics by Hofstadter. I think that was his name. And there was a poll. The very first question
randomness meaning that what? Yeah, the second law of thermodynamics, that things move towards disorder. Is that what you're saying?
No, that there is things that happen that are uncaused.
No, that's not true. And in fact, I can show you. I can send you the information because I
literally just gave you a study that proves this is the case. This is the consensus. So,
I'm fundamental. One of the physicists says that there is no consensus as to what's really going on in terms of whether it's a causal thing that you can explain or a non-causal thing.
Okay, that's a different topic, so that's not a part of the question.
No.
Wait. Let me clarify. I'm very well educated in physics here. The question you asked is about an interpretation of what fundamental theory is causing the experimental data we see in quantum mechanics, like many worlds hypothesis, string theory, Bohr.
These are all
Bohr pilot wave collapse. These are irrelevant because they all agree on the one thing, that randomness is fundamental. And so that part isn't a disagreement. Like, there's a huge consensus with a very, very small amount of people who disagree that randomness is fundamental. Like, I'm looking at the poll right here. This is from Cornell University, a snapshot of foundational attitudes towards quantum mechanics by Schlosshauser. Very first question is randomness a fundamental force, or is it a hidden variable or something we haven't discovered yet? And where is it? I just lost it. Random.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this is not my field. Physics is not my field.
It is my field. So randomness is only apparent, 9%. There's a hidden determinism, 0%. Randomness is irreducible, 48%. Randomness is a fundamental concept in nature, 64%. There is a massive consensus that randomness is not only apparent. It's not caused by like a pilot wave theory or hidden variable. Its hidden variable is 0%. There is a huge consensus. It is irreducible. Means not caused by anything.
So you're saying that in physics, they all agree that some things are not caused?
Yes, that is the consensus.
Okay. And what caused you to come to that conclusion?
So
you have to use the principles of causality to make any statement about reality. Science is based on the principles of causality and uniformity. And when you go away from that, then you're going out of science.
Well, no. So there's a difference. Wait. So I think you're confusing the methodology with the conclusion. You can use the methodology to go beyond the things you're doing the experiment with. So, for example, if you're doing an experiment in a box in a lab on quantum particles, you can then infer that these quantum particles affect things outside of the box in other locations. And so if we're using stuff inside of space-time and physics that is determined in a box, we can still make theories that tell us about things that are not determined, that are outside the box. So the reason you asked me, the reason of why, what brought me to these, it's Bell's theorem and the Geisler-Speckler theorem.
Okay,
These are called no-go theorems.
I'm still saying that there are reputable physicists that have said that there is no proven way of understanding all the things that we see in physics. And I don't want to argue about it. I'll send it to you.
That's a different question on the exact same poll. So I agree with that.
No, because it has to do with causality. The moment you say something isn't caused, you assume that there's no causality involved, but you haven't.
No, because we did actually prove these. There are actual physics theories that I just told you about called Bell's theorem, Bell's inequality.
They're theories. They're not proven facts.
These are proven facts. They were these were confirmed experimentally like a month ago.
Okay. So,
but wait. So Bell's theorem, Bell's inequality theorem, and the Kochen-Speckler theorem, which was confirmed about a month ago in a lab with the Casimir effect. We did an experiment in a lab to prove this was true, that these theories do explain that there are constraints that show that hidden variable theory is wrong, which is why the consensus of physicists say it's random.
You can send me what you want to send me, and I'll send you what I've been studying. And I admit, I just started studying this, so I don't have as much knowledge on this area, but I know there is not a consensus yet. All right, so number 12, if you could tangibly prove, if I could tangibly prove to you that there's evil in the world that's more than human origin, that is demonic, would that case would the case for Christianity be stronger than what you thought before?
Well, if you showed it was demonic, I guess. I believe I'm a moral realist. Most philosophers are atheists, but they're also moral realists. So most philosophers believe there is a real right and real wrong, good and evil out there.
Okay.
But the demon part, we don't think it's from demons. If you showed it was from demons, yes, I would agree that the demon part would be more evidence of Christianity than the other models. But the good and evil part, no, those can exist without Christianity.
Okay, so let me ask you a further question related to that. Do you believe if God exists, he can only be good? He cannot be
No.
evil? Okay, so let me ask you this question. Do you determine what is good based on the standard of evil, or do you determine what is evil based on the standard of good?
I look at the evidence and come to a conclusion based on the patterns in the evidence. So
No,
neither.
no, you're not willing to admit that you evaluate what is evil based on the standard of good. St. Augustine talked about this, that it's evil is an ontological parasite. It cannot exist apart from good. Evil is a privation, is a lack of good, and that therefore God is infinitely good and not evil. And
Well, that's wrong. So goodness can exist without evil, and evil can exist without goodness. It's very easy to demonstrate this. You can have a universe of no good actions, but lots of evil actions. So no helping grannies across the street, lots of murder, lots of evil, no good. So it is possible to have.
But when you compare what is, you're comparing what is evil based on the standard of goodness, not the other way around. You're not comparing what's good based on the standard of evil.
No, so there's three things.
Really?
There's moral, there's immoral, and there's amoral. So amoral is like a neutral ground, like a rock falls or something. A rock falls on the ground. It's amoral.
Right.
And so you can compare immoral actions to amoral actions, and moral actions to amoral actions.
Let's talk about moral actions.
Okay.
How do you understand moral actions? You compare what is evil or what is bad based on the standard of good.
No. Again,
Why not?
Because there's a third option there called amoral. So like if I say magnets, magnets have a positive and a negative end. If I compare the positive end to something that's neutral, I can know that the positive thing exists without knowing that there's a negative thing, because there's this other thing we're comparing it to, which is neutral. So we can have a positive and a neutral and still know there's a difference between the two, even if no negative exists. And morality and immorality are the same. There can be a moral object, and we can compare that to a amoral object and know that the moral object exists, even if there is no immoral object. So there could be a positive, a negative, and a neutral, and we can have the positive without the negative as long as we have the neutral to compare it to.
So let me give you another example, because I don't think you're following me. Would you say that Mother Teresa was a better person, did more good things than Adolf Hitler?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what you're doing is you're comparing that to a standard of goodness. You're not comparing it to a standard of evil. You have a standard of goodness in your mind, and you're saying, Adolf Hitler doesn't measure up.
No, I am not doing that. That is wrong.
Mother Teresa.
No, that is wrong. I'm not doing that. So like, there's two different categories.
You just not admitting it.
No, I'm very well educated in the philosophy of morality and ethics, and I'm quite well educated in this topic. I'm not doing that, and
I know philosophers.
I'm not interested in what other philosophers do, and I'm telling you, I can prove I'm not doing that, because there's a standard I use. I wrote a model of morality. I have a model of morality that I literally wrote, and so I can tell you exactly the criteria I'm using here. There are separate categories of moral and immoral.
Amoral. You have an amoral morality?
No, I did not say that. There are separate categories of moral and immoral, and you can contrast them independent of one another. And so the amount of moral actions that you do is completely independent of the amount of immoral actions that you do. So, for example, in the trolley problem, famous model of morality, there's a trolley coming down the tracks. There's 5 people that it's going to hit and kill, and you have the option of flipping a switch, and it can go down a different track where it kills 1 person.
Yeah.
If you flip the switch, you've done 5 moral actions and
Right.
1 immoral action.
Right.
These are not comparative. They are separate categories. They're entirely separate. You've done 5 moral actions and 1 immoral action. Neither of them override. They don't compare. They don't contrast. The thing they contrast to is the rock, the amoral action.
But the only way you can see something as moral is if you're comparing it with a standard of goodness.
No, that's wrong. I can see it's moral if I compare it to an amoral thing.
So wait.
Nothing.
No, amoral won't tell you anything. It won't be a standard which you can measure things by.
Yes, it can. So if I do nothing, so like if I have the option to help someone, but I do nothing, that's an amoral action. So I can compare if I help the old lady across the street versus not helping the old lady across the street. That is a comparison between a moral action and an amoral action.
Okay. If you will send me your paper, I would be glad to read it, but I really don't think you can pull this one off. But let's move on.
I literally just proved it. So like I'm not sure what you're missing about this. Wait. So can you compare doing something moral to doing something amoral? Can you make that comparison?
What is amoral?
Amoral, not moral, not immoral. It's nothing.
Okay, so what do you mean?
Picking your nose is picking your nose moral?
I mean, there are lots of okay. So you're saying there are lots of things we did aren't necessarily good or bad.
Yes,
right?
They're amoral. They are neither good nor bad. They are not either.
But the moment that you try to do something, improve yourself or whatever, you're comparing the standard of goodness, not the standard of evil. You're comparing you're saying, I want to be a better father. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better person. You're comparing it by a higher standard of goodness, not a lesser standard of evil. As Augustine said, evil is a privation. Anyway.
Well, no. So again, that's provably wrong. So like, take this example. Take this easy example. Okay. I could help the old lady across the street, or I could pick my nose.
Okay, some examples of morality are not as clear as others. Like you would agree that most anthropologists agree that there are at least 2 things that all cultures believe is right or wrong. They believe it's not right to take another man's wife, and they believe it's not right to unnecessarily beat children. Okay.
Now, neither of those things are universal.
Let me finish. You can tell what someone believes not by what they do, but by what they would want you to do to them. That's how we determine what a person believes morally. And these are all moral standards that all cultures accept as wrong.
Nope.
Anthropologists, this is not something that's debated among anthropologists.
It's not debated because it's false. Like there are cultures that say it's okay to beat children. In fact, that's a really common thing in the United States.
No, unnecessarily. To beat children unnecessarily, or to take another man's wife. These are things, and C.S. Lewis talked about this,
which are very common throughout history. So like Roman culture, polygamy, open relationships.
But I'm saying that you tell not what someone believes by what they do, but by what they would want you to do to them. So there are 2 moral laws.
Well, that's not a thing in anthropology. So in ethics, that's not
moral laws. Then there must be a standard of goodness in which you're measuring. I just don't understand how you don't see this. Anyway, let's move on, okay? Would you agree that David Hume was not just a skeptic, that he believed in some kind of deistic God?
No, I don't know. I'm not interested in David Hume.
In my father's book, which is what we were going to talk about, page 149, my father says this. In his introduction to his dialogues, Hume wrote, "What truth is so obvious, so certain as the being of a God, which the most ignorant ages have acknowledged, for which the most refined geniuses have ambitiously strived to produce new proofs and arguments." What Hume did claim to dispute was the nature of that divine being, his attributes, his decrees, his plans of providence. And he gives the example that David Hume cited with the deist Cleanthes. I'm not pronouncing that right. Cleanthes in his famous dialogues concerning natural religion. So Hume was a skeptic, but he was a deist. It's not that he didn't believe in God. He just didn't think that you could demonstrate what kind of God that is, what's the nature of that divine being, and that kind of thing. So, would you agree with what I just said or not?
There is limited evidence to indicate that he was a deist. The preponderance of evidence indicates he was an atheist, but I don't really care either way.
Okay,
Like, I'd
so
leave that up to the historians.
yeah, but I mean, in his introduction, he said, "What truth is so obvious, so certain as that the being of God, which the most ignorant ages have acknowledged." I mean, he says it right in his introduction. I just want
Well,
to point
Einstein uses the word God many times, but he was a devout atheist or naturalistic
He
pantheist.
wasn't. No, he wasn't about atheist, but he was probably more of a deist. Probably Einstein.
No, he was more of a pantheist, but I don't care.
Okay.
I don't care about what Hume was. It doesn't make any difference.
All right. So, all right. So, number 14. Would you agree that most skeptics and atheists' primary barrier to Christianity is not the lack of evidence for God or lack of evidence for the resurrection? It's because they want to live their life a certain way and they don't want a God to interfere.
No.
Like, okay, so I'm not saying that you don't have objections to faith or questions that you feel like have not been fully answered. I'm saying that's not the primary barrier.
No. So there was actually a poll on atheists of why they left the religion. There's a 50-50% split with a slight majority on the lack of evidence and contradictions in the Bible, and a like 40-something% split on moral immorality of the Christian religion. So those are the two primary reasons people leave the faith.
So, okay, so let me just take you as an example. Tom, if I somehow, and I'm not saying I can, if I could somehow convince you there's evidence for a theistic God and evidence that Christianity is true, right now you would repent of your sins, you would turn around, you would invite Jesus to come into your life to change you from the inside out, you would invite him to take control of your life from this day forward. You do all these things what it means to be a Christian if you could get all the answers to your questions about God and Christianity. Would you do that?
No, because God's immoral. Like, there's immorality in the Bible. So even if God existed, it would be our job to usurp the God, not worship it.
Okay. All right. So in other words, there are other things. You agree there are other things other than just the intellectual arguments that would keep you from actually becoming a Christian.
Well, no, morality is an intellectual argument. So the facts of the Bible go against our evidence, our logical conclusions about morality, just like the facts of the Bible.
Okay,
Wait, one second. The facts of the Bible go against our moral evidence, just like the facts of the Bible go against our geological evidence. So I consider moral as a form of logical evidence in the field of philosophy, just like geology is in science.
Right. So let me re-clarify. Let's just assume that for some reason you could work out all these, quote, immoral acts of God, and you now understand that God is not acting immoral, that he's acting moral, and that you see God as good and all these things, and that Christianity is true. Then what's stopping you from putting your faith and trust in Christ and allowing him to change you?
Nothing.
Nothing would stop you?
No. So if there was actually a morally perfect.
Yeah. So let me interject something. I told you that I'm friends with John Loftus. And one of the reasons that I started reading his books is because I wanted to better understand what is it that I was missing as a Christian. I wanted to understand what were the arguments that atheists and skeptics were asking that, apparently as Christians, we're not giving as much good answers to. And so it didn't convince me that Christianity wasn't true, but it did convince me that we as Christians need to do a better job of answering these questions about God's morality, about sin, about hell, and those kinds of things. Now, let me just give you an example, Tom, to show you how I try to do that and then you can give me feedback on this. One day I was talking to a student on a college campus, and he asked me this question: why can't God just let me into heaven? And so one of the things that my father and I talk about in our book, Conversational Evangelism, is that there are 4 questions you should ask and answer when someone raises an objection so that you can think it through clearly. What's the question behind the question? What is the terms that need to be clarified? What's the truth we want someone to understand? And what's a story or illustration to illustrate the truth? So let's just deal with the question 3. What is the truth I want this student to understand? Well, I want him to understand that we tend to overestimate our own righteousness and underestimate God's holiness. All right. Now, how can I illustrate this? Well, I noticed he was drinking a cup of water. So I asked him this question. I said, would it be okay if I put a little sewage in your water? He said, no. I said, it's just a tiny little bit of sewage. He said, it still wouldn't be okay. I said, so you see how something small can have a big impact? And he said, yes. I said, that's kind of how we look at sins. We look at them as something small, but unfortunately to God, they have a big impact. So this is my way, Tom, of trying to explain that from an eternal being's perspective, he sees sin differently than we see sin. Just like though we look at water and we see putting sewage in water, it's not something we want to drink. Well, maybe God's standards are higher than our own if we're finite creatures, and he is infinite, all powerful, and all holy. So anyway, so that's just one example. So I do agree that Christians need to do a better job and go maybe beyond like C.S. Lewis kind of answers for the problem of evil and suffering. And so these are some of the things that I'm thinking about more and more is how do we communicate this? And I think if we can help people to understand, first of all, that evil and suffering is not a matter of, just my 90-year existence. When God allows things to happen in our life, it's for our eternity, not for a 90-year existence. And so if we can explain these things in terms of eternity and not just 90 years existence, I actually think that there are better ways to communicate some of these things. That's my perspective.
Well, sure. I've definitely heard that argument before, but I think it's a logical contradiction for a moral being to, the example I like to use is Jesus drowned babies. Is your position that God is like a Trinitarian God is fully Jesus? Jesus is fully God, that kind of position?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are you like a Trinitarian where
Yes.
Jesus is fully God and God is fully Jesus?
Yes, I believe that God is 3 persons in one nature. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And God flooded the world.
So I believe that, like, for example, that we have obligations that God doesn't have.
Oh, so I want to just, I'm trying to like get to an argument here. So,
Okay. Right.
Jesus is fully God and God flooded the world. Noah's Ark kind of thing. I don't know if you take that literally or not, but if he did, then there were babies on the world when it flooded. So that means Jesus drowned babies. And I would say it's a logical contradiction for a perfectly moral being to drown babies. Therefore, God cannot under any circumstances be a perfectly moral being.
Okay, but what if those people, like the Bible teaches, were evil?
The babies that were on the world, that the babies were evil.
Okay, well, the babies have a certain nature, right? And yeah, I mean, isn't that possibly that God justified in bringing some kind of condemnation upon mankind for the evil things that they've done and the consequences? So you're saying that take all the adults but leave the babies.
Well, I'm using the example of the most innocent beings that existed at the time period.
Yeah.
And so God flooded the babies who were clearly innocent. Even the Bible says that you have to be of some certain age to be able to be held culpable for evil actions. And so the babies were not. And so by that, they can't be called evil. They can't be said they have an evil nature.
Well, there's certain consequences to there's certain consequences to God's judgment. There's certain indirect things that are like remember you were saying that if God has to operate in certain parameters, then there's certain consequences, right? And I would say that maybe babies is one of the consequences. But it's not like God snuffed their life out. Christians don't believe that when you leave this life, you're gone completely. You go to the next life, right?
Well, that wouldn't make a difference. So the argument is that even if he drowns the babies.
Okay, so here's what I'm trying to say: that God has obligations that we have obligations that God doesn't. For example, I do not have the right to kill someone unless it's self-defense. But but our government has the right to take a life. So our government has different moral responsibilities than we do. We don't have the right to take a life other than self-defense. But our government,
that would be subjective morality. I believe in objective morality. So I believe that morality is stance independent.
No, I'm saying that that's objectively true, that God, as a creator, can give life and he can take life.
Well, that's subjective morality. So that means that one subject has different moral obligations than a different subject. So I believe in objective morality. I believe that all subjects have the same moral obligation.
It's objective morality, but it's not applied the same way. Just like a teacher, when a teacher says to a classroom of students, be quiet, and the student says, but you're talking.
Yeah, so objective,
apply, right?
No, so that's a subjective rule. That's a subjective rule implied in a classroom that subjectively applies to the students and not to the teacher. That's a subjective rule. If it's an objective rule like gravity, it's applied to everybody. You don't get it. There's no exceptions. So objective, by definition in philosophy, means stance independent. Objective morality is stance independent normative facts. So in the case for a morality to be objective, it can't be subjectively applied to beings of this nature.
Yeah, because if we're different beings, if God is an eternal being and we're a contingent being, then there's certain obligations that we have that God doesn't have.
That's subjective morality.
No.
That's literally what subjective means. Subjective means these beings who have this subjective nature have a different set of rules than these beings of this subjective nature. So that's literally subjective morality. Objective means that is not the case. You can't say this subject has this obligation and this subject does not, because that's literally the opposite of objective.
Yeah, no, I don't see
that.
But
just to clarify my argument. So I believe in objective morality, which means all beings of any nature, of any consciousness whatsoever, are all bound by the same objective normative facts. And it is logically contradictory for any being, including a God, to drown babies for any reason ever. It's a logical contradiction for
wait.
For it to be more
to allow babies to be drowned. You're saying not cause them to be drowned, right?
To cause them. I think God caused it.
Well,
allow would be like
okay, when God allowed the flood, however he did that, okay, there's certain consequences, right? There's certain. So I tried to ask you this question. So God is just supposed to drown the adults and save all the babies.
Well, he wouldn't. If he was moral, he wouldn't do either. But that's separate to the argument. So the argument is using the babies as a necessary
condition. But if he has to judge because of his nature, if he has to judge, right? Could he have just drowned all the adults and saved all the babies?
Sure, if he's all powerful, sure, he could have, but that would still make him immoral.
But remember, you said he has to do things within certain parameters,
right?
And so, I mean, he could intervene and send angels to help the babies. But I mean, is that really what you think he should have done?
Well, no, I don't think he should have drowned anybody. But
okay, but if
my argument here is that if God has a nature that requires him to drown the world and drown the babies, that nature by definition must necessarily be immoral. It can't be moral. There's a logical contradiction for him having a nature that requires him to do this and him being moral. Those are logically contradictory statements like a round
In
square.
ethics, have you heard the expression the greater good or lesser of two evils?
Yes.
Sometimes in life, we have to do the greater good or lesser of two evils.
Yes, but God's all powerful, so he doesn't have that problem.
Okay. When you say he's all powerful, he has to stay within the bounds of freedom in certain things, right?
No. So like I can prove that
if you have two moral laws that God commands, and you can obey both of them at the same time, like lying to save a life, which one choose?
Lying is less bad.
Life. Yeah,
Sure.
you do the lesser evil. Well, what if God is put in that kind of situation as well? He's got to choose the greater good or lesser of two evils if he only has two choices.
Well, he's not. He's all powerful. He doesn't have two choices.
Well, I'm saying that if he only has given, because of the parameters he set up by creating this world, he is allowed two choices. What can he do?
He's not. So like if he put himself in a situation where he must do two evil actions, then he is evil.
No, two
so
lesser good. Two lesser two evils or greater
drowning babies isn't a good. Drowning babies is an evil. So if God created the world such that he must do one of two evils, and one is a worse evil and one is a lesser evil.
What if he also knew their nature and knew that they would be like their parents as well?
Still evil. Still evil. So if God created the world such that he has two options, he made the world such that he must do one of these two evil options. Instead of making the world where he doesn't have to do one of these two options, then he is by definition evil. He has created an evil situation where he must choose an evil. He is by definition evil. It is a logical contradiction to say that he created a world where he has to drown babies and is therefore moral for doing so.
Well, what are the other alternatives? You still didn't give me an alternative what he could do, like leave the babies and then take the adults that need to be punished. Is that
no? What a moral being would do is, if there was an all-powerful moral being, what it would do is it would give every single conscious agent its own universe that it can design however it likes, and make it like add an extra law of physics that says it is physically impossible to force any being to do anything they don't consent to doing. Problem solved.
So, so, but then that's kind of taking away their freedom eventually.
No, it doesn't take away anything.
Yeah, because it's like, well, in those worlds, you don't think that they're going to choose to do bad things?
It's physically impossible to force any being to do anything they don't consent to doing. So if I wanted to punch somebody in the face,
okay, but if it's something
wait. So if I wanted to punch somebody in the face, if they didn't consent to it, it would be physically impossible for me to do it. So I'd like try to punch them and it would just like go through like they're a ghost. Just wouldn't be able to do it. I still have the freedom to try. It's not going to work. They still have the freedom to accept it if they want. They just don't. So everybody still has free will, but it's physically impossible for the fist to connect to their face if they don't consent to it. So there's no violation of free will here.
That's taking free will from them. Anyway, I don't want to argue this. Yeah, it is. It is.
No, it's not.
When you stop someone from being able to do something evil, you're taking away their free will, right?
Stephen Hawking is a quadriplegic.
If we're free to love God, we also have to be free to hate God.
Yes, we still have the freedom to hate God, but Stephen Hawking was a paraplegic. Stephen Hawking could not punch me in the face. Did Stephen Hawking have free will?
Yeah, he could find other ways to kill you. He could hire someone to kill you.
So say he couldn't. Say he was physically impossible for Stephen Hawking to find anyone to kill me.
Adding conditions to it. I'm just saying that we as agents can do evil. That's what free will is. The ability.
Yes, we can still hate God. It didn't say we couldn't do evil. The fact that it is physically impossible to kill another human being or to force them to do anything they don't consent to doing is not the same as evil. So you can still lie, you can still cheat, you can still hate God as much as you want.
In a sense, God is making us robots, and you're saying that kind of life is better than I don't see your argument really.
So the way this argument works is that anything that your mind can conceptualize, you can still conceptualize. So there's no limits on your mind here. The only limits are the physical ability to enact
Right.
those things on others, which
Right.
means you necessarily have free will. It's impossible for you not to have free will because I'm literally taking all of your mental states in this world and copying them. So you can't say you don't have free will. It's not a logical option here. You have to have free will. And so this does not in any way violate free will any more than the fact that you can't fly violates your free will.
So
Like there are physical
wait,
limitations.
but if you have free will, you have the ability to do otherwise, correct?
Sure.
Okay, so then you can choose evil.
Sure. Doesn't mean you can physically enact it. So like, can you fly? Can you jump out of your window and fly?
Okay, so you're saying that a world in which people don't actually do evil, but only think about doing evil is a better world?
Yes, that would be a better world. But again, my question was, can you jump out of your window and fly? Like you can't, right? It's not,
No,
you can't just
no.
like fly. Do you still have free will?
I don't have free will to fly if that's something that was part of what it means to have free will. So that analogy, it doesn't actually work.
Well, so free will is the ability to do otherwise. It's not the
Correct.
ability to do anything, right?
Right. It's the ability to do otherwise, which means the possibility of evil, and God has to give us.
Wait. Free will means the ability to do otherwise,
Right.
but it does not mean the ability to do anything, right?
It doesn't mean the ability to do anything. It just means that you can do whatever, right? Like,
No, like I can't nuke anybody. I don't have any nukes. I can't nuke a continent. I do not have the ability to do that.
okay,
So there's an immoral action that I cannot do. I
right.
cannot do that immoral action.
Yeah,
Right?
I still
Say I
don't.
wanted to abort a baby. I can't abort a baby because I'm not a woman. I don't have the ability to abort a baby. So there are certain immoral actions I cannot do, but I
Okay,
still have free will. Free will does not mean you have the ability to do literally every immoral
oh,
action.
right. Okay, so that analogy, yes. So yeah, free will means the ability to do otherwise. But if you can't, either you do it in your mind or you do it in action, but it's still it's still something wrong, right?
Yes.
You still shouldn't be thinking these things, or you still shouldn't be acting these things. And you're just saying
If you
that
look at another man's wife, it's just as it's just sin, right? That's what Jesus said. Even if you look at another man's wife,
right,
is
right.
envy.
So,
So you don't need to
so,
actually do it.
but I don't understand how your solution actually helps God.
Helps God. Well, so it's what helps is that it makes the world moral. This is what a moral being would create, because there's nothing immoral for thinking, even though in Christianity it's a sin. It's not actually a sin, but in this world this is a morally perfect world. So a world where no one can physically harm anybody else without their consent, and you can still
Right.
do all the thinking. You can think about whatever you want. Think about murdering everyone. That's totally fine. So you still
Mhm.
get all the Christian sins with the thinking stuff. So we haven't limited your free will. I don't
Right.
believe there is free will, but you still would have
Right.
free will if it existed in this world. So this would not violate your free will whatsoever.
So Tom, are you saying that you do believe there's a God, but that he's really blown it? He hasn't really set the world up in the right way, and therefore he's not worthy of worship?
No, I'm saying if there was a God, he would be evil if he did this, but I don't believe
Okay.
there is a God.
So, but you exist, and
Yeah.
something can't come from nothing, then
Mhm.
something must have always existed, correct?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. And then that something that always existed must be all powerful, right?
I don't think all powerful is like it's
How
really
can
powerful,
something,
really
okay,
powerful.
so how can something exist eternally without having all power?
Well, I don't think all powerful is like a coherent term. I don't know what it means to be all powerful. It just has to have.
That means there's nothing that limits you in terms of your nature.
Okay, that doesn't make sense. So there's like if you have a nature, God is not me. Like I am not God, God is not me. That means God's nature is limited in the fact that he is not me. And so the definitions provided in that kind of Thomistic worldview of nothing limiting your nature
Okay.
is arbitrary.
So
But I would say
no.
that I would agree that the fundamental nature of reality must be extremely powerful. Yes, it
Yeah.
must have some infinite amount of power, but it doesn't
Okay.
have like all powerful is not a term that I think
Okay.
works.
All right. Forget the word all powerful, but it has extreme, let's just say extreme power. Then, then you are dependent on that extreme power for your existence. True or not true?
Sort of. So I'm dependent on it existing first for me to exist, but I don't think it sustains everything, like actively sustains everything. Like if it stopped existing, everything would stop existing. I don't think that's the case, but I think my current existence would require it starting the universe in the first place.
Okay, so if you're a contingent being, how could you exist forever? I thought in philosophy there's two kinds of beings. There's necessary and contingent being. You're saying you deny those categories of philosophy?
Well, sort of, but that's a different topic. So let's grant necessary and contingent beings. Contingent beings can still exist infinitely. It just means it doesn't exist in all possible worlds. Necessary being is a being
Well,
that exists in all possible.
God can and will sustain our existence for eternity. I believe that, but I didn't exist eternally.
Right. So like you can exist eternally in the future, but not eternally in the past.
However you understand the future, yeah, that's the problem. Because if God was there from eternity, there was no time before God. There was only time after God created space-time dimension, Genesis 1:1, right? So I don't know what that means in terms of eternity, that I'm living on eternally, when everlasting life is a better term.
Well, your question is can contingent beings exist eternally? And yes, contingent beings can exist eternally.
But not in and of itself, not in their own power. They can't exist in their own power. Because remember, we did talk about this. A potential for existence cannot actualize itself. It must be actualized by something actual.
Well, so again, I reject potential and actuality. They're not real properties.
Well, you reject it, but you haven't given me any good grounds for rejecting it.
Well, I did, because they're abstracts like tallness. So there's no such thing as the essence of tallness. Tallness is a property that can be applied to things, but tallness in and of itself is not an existing thing. You can't have like essence of tallness.
Tom's contingent existence isn't a contingent existence?
What? So contingent and necessary are different from potentiality and actuality. Those are two separate distinctions.
Okay, but wait a second. A necessary being is a being that doesn't have any potential, is pure actuality. And therefore, only a being of pure actuality can actualize any potential. If you have potential for existence, it has to be actualized by something actual, not something potential. And if God is only a potential being, a contingent being, he can't be the cause of another contingent being. In fact, that's the argument my father talks about in his book.
So in philosophy, necessary being means a being that exists in all possible worlds. It has nothing to do with potentiality and actuality. So if you're adding those in, that would be not the standard usage in philosophy. So I would definitely reject potentiality and actuality. I think those are nothing. But I do accept necessary and contingent beings, because in the classical philosophical definitions of those terms.
Okay, so tell me what's wrong with this syllogism. Something undeniably exists. My non-existence is possible. Possibility for non-existence implies that one is currently caused to exist by another. There cannot be an infinite regress of current causes of existence. Therefore, a first uncaused cause of my current existence must exist. This uncaused cause must be infinite, unchanging, all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-perfect. And then this infinite perfect being is appropriately called God. Therefore, a theistic God exists. This God who exists is identical to the God described in the Christian scriptures. Therefore, the God described in the Bible exists.
Well, there's lots of premises that were false there, but could you go through that slower so I can go through them one at a time?
Something undeniably exists. You and I exist, right?
Yep.
But my non-existence is possible. My existence fits into one of three logical categories: either impossible, possible, or necessary. All right.
Something exists. Non-existence is possible. Yes.
Impossible, possible, or necessary. My existence is possible, but not necessary.
Let's just go through just the premises.
All right.
So premise 1 is something undeniably exists. Premise 2 is non-existence is possible. Premise 3 is
possibility for non-existence implies that one is currently caused to exist by another.
Okay, could you say that again really slowly?
Yeah. Possibility for non-existence implies that one is currently caused to exist by another.
That would be false.
Okay, why is that?
Brute facts are possible.
Brute facts are possible.
Yeah, a brute fact is an uncaused contingent thing. It's a typical thing in philosophy. So a brute fact would be like a contingent thing that has the possibility of not existing, but it isn't caused by another thing.
How, that's where I rejected those categories when you talked about physics before, that something can be explained in a non-causal way.
Well, this isn't physics. This is philosophy. So in philosophy, brute facts are pretty common.
Wait. What is brute? Explain to me. What do you mean by brute facts? That doesn't make sense.
So a brute fact is a contingent thing that exists. So it could be otherwise. Contingent means it could be otherwise, but it exists and it is uncaused. So a brute fact is a thing that has no explanation, but it is contingent.
Give me an example of a contingent thing that could exist apart from any kind of necessary.
So there's a universe with nothing but a pineapple in it. There's a universe with nothing but a potato in it. So there's two universes. One has just a pineapple. One has just a potato. Those are both brute facts of that universe. So they never not exist.
The universe is contingent. It's not an eternal. Even scientists now acknowledge, like Hoyle, who believed in the steady state theory, that the universe had a beginning.
That's our universe. So I'm saying these are different universes that are not our universe. In these universes, there is no stars, no planets, no black holes. There's just a potato and a pineapple. Two different universes.
Let's just say in those universes, you're also saying there's no cause-effect relationship?
There is still cause and effect. But
so
the pineapple does not have a cause.
If there's cause-effect relationships, then these laws of logic still apply to that universe.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So then contingent beings must be dependent on something that's necessary.
No, there's no laws of logic that says brute facts can't exist.
I'm still not following.
So laws of logic, law of identity.
So anything that's temporal has the ability not to be. So the question is, what causing it to be, including a tree or fruit tree or whatever? What caused it to exist if it didn't exist eternally? Nothing. So you're saying nothing caused something.
No, it did exist eternally. So nothing caused it. It has existed eternally. It's uncaused, but it's still contingent. It's a contingent, uncaused thing that existed eternally.
If it's contingent, that means it has potential.
Yes.
But then how can that potential be actualized?
It doesn't need to be.
How could something that's finite actually be eternal?
Well, it's eternal and it's like it's always existed, but it could be otherwise. So there's a pineapple, and the pineapple could have been a tomato, but it wasn't. It's a pineapple. So it's contingent because it could have been otherwise, but it's eternal because it's always existed there. And so it's a contingent, eternal, uncaused thing, which is a brute fact.
But anything that applies a limitation implies contingency.
Yes, it's contingent.
Space, time, and that kind of thing.
Right.
And so therefore, once you have a limitation, then you have something that's contingent, and whatever's contingent could exist, could not exist. And
yes, I agreed with all of that.
I
agreed with all that. So it's a pineapple. It could have been a tomato, so it could have been differently. That means it's contingent. So there's a contingent pineapple, and the contingent pineapple never not existed in this universe. It's eternal. It's an eternally contingent pineapple, and nothing caused it, which means it's a brute.
Tom, you know
pineapple.
That's absurd.
No, this is not absurd. This is basic philosophy. This is
very,
very common.
No, that's not basic philosophy. Don't try to convince me of that.
Brute. If you just Google brute, wait. So if you just Google brute fact in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy,
wait, but it's absurd.
If you just Google brute fact, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is an academic philosophical journal.
Don't necessarily say the smartest things, like when they say what caused God. You can't ask what the cause of the first cause is. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the first cause. And
so there's two separate things there. One thing is that is this standard philosophy? Yes, brute facts are standard academic philosophy. Now you can disagree with that. You can say academic philosophers are silly.
Brute facts of contingent things that are eternal.
Yes, that's what a brute fact means, an uncaused contingent thing. That's literally the definition of brute fact, uncaused contingent thing.
That's literally absurd. Send me the paper on that. I want to follow up with you on this.
Stanford Encyclopedia
So
Philosophy.
so you
Root
disagree
Fact.
with the possibility for non-existence implies that one is currently caused to exist by another. And then,
Yes.
therefore, there cannot be an infinite regress of current causes of existence.
Wait, what? Was that a different premise?
There cannot be an infinite regress of current causes of existence.
Yeah, that's rejected too.
Of current existence. Well, you existed because you're developing this elephant that basically that something contingent can be eternal, and I think that that's a contradiction. In terms.
Wait, so like, can there be an infinite past set of causes, sequential causes? Yes. So I'm not sure if you mean an infinite current set. I don't know what that means, but there could be an infinite past set of causes. Yes.
So my father's argument is not a beginning causality argument. It's not just a beginning causality argument. It's a current causality argument as well. That you need a beginning cause for your existence and a current cause for your existence.
I do not know exactly what that means.
Well, if you're a contingent being and you can't exist without, if you have the ability not to exist, and you do exist, then how do you exist? Well, you have to be sustained. Like, let me give you an illustration of this. Let's just say I wanted to go out on a date with my wife, and I needed some money. I needed $30, and I don't have it right now. Okay, so I borrow from John. And John says to me, I'll give you the $30, David, but he doesn't have it, but he has to borrow. So he has to borrow from Fred. And then Fred's going to give him the money, and then he's going to give the money to me. But the problem is Fred doesn't have it. And you keep borrowing infinitely. I'm never going to get the money to take my wife out on a date. So if you and I do not have the ground for our existence, must borrow from somebody else who borrows from somebody else, and then you do that infinitely, you can't explain why I currently exist. If I don't have the ground for existence, but I have to get it from somebody else, but they don't have the ground for their existence, they have to get it from somebody else, then ultimately you can't go on infinitely. Otherwise,
yes, you can. So that's what you're assuming is called a tensed theory of time. A tensed theory means that the current moment is sustained by the previous moment, which is sustained by the previous moment. That could all be false. Like if there's a non-tensed theory of time, like the B theory of time, all instances exist simultaneously, and one is not caused by the previous one. And so it's perfectly possible to have an infinite.
Well, I'm not talking about issues in time. I'm just saying ontologically it's necessary.
Right. That's the reason I'm bringing up a tensed theory of time, is to show that it's possible to have an infinite past of time, temporal events. This is one of the possible things. You have an infinite past of temporal events, and without any one of them being the initial cause of the other ones, because if you have all of them existing at the same time, then the current moment that we are at, you don't have to go through an infinite amount of past seconds to get to this second, because they all existed simultaneously. It's B theory of time. So your argument only applies to tensed theories, such as the tensed theory of time. And if it's even possible for there to be a non-tensed theory, then that would invalidate your argument. And there are, in fact, the consensus.
Why would that invalidate my argument?
So your argument was about money and saying, if I keep borrowing money, and everybody borrows, then there's no initial starting point of the money.
But that analogy was to show that if I do not have the ground for my current existence, I must borrow from somebody else who must borrow from somebody else, and they don't have the ground, then you can't explain why it currently exists.
So in that argument, the ground is tensed. You have a tensed ground. And if there's a non-tensed ground, then it would solve the problem.
What does that mean?
It means that the previous instance is sustained by the one that's prior to it. So if I borrow $5 from...
it's an ontological connection. I'm not necessarily saying it's I'm not... whether it's in time or not, it doesn't matter.
You're right. It doesn't matter. Tensed applies to all things, not just time. Tensed theories of times, tensed theories of ontology, tensed theories of anything.
I don't understand.
Tense just means that one time, like the present moment, is sustained by the previous moment. And if the previous moment disappears, the present moment would disappear. A
Okay,
non-tensed theory
no,
of time.
no. But I'm not talking about that, a theory of time.
Time is just an example. I'm using that as an example here.
About logically.
Oh, so logically, you are wrong. Logically, the whatever instance you want to say is not tensed. That means it is not dependent on a prior example. It doesn't matter. What doesn't matter if it's time or money or anything. A non-tensed theory means all of the instances of the existence are simultaneous. They have simultaneity. None of them need to exist prior to the other ones.
So in other words, there's no cause-effect relationship in
you still have cause-effect relationship, but the particular thing you're talking about is not caused by the previous instance. It's caused by something else, a third dimension.
Yeah, but okay, but if these all things are still contingent, if the universe as a whole is contingent, you have to explain the contingency of the universe, Tom.
Well, you don't. Then it'd be brute fact. You can have brute facts where it's not explained, but I'm happy to explain it too, because I think there is a necessary being. I think it's a quantum field. So I believe in a necessary being. It's a quantum field, and I believe that I like tensed theories of time. So I don't think there's an infinite regress, but there can be. There's no logical contradiction with an infinite past. There's no logical contradiction with a brute fact, and there's no logical contradiction with non-tensed time.
Create the universe? How can a force create anything?
So quantum fields aren't a force. Quantum fields are a thing.
Okay, so quantum force or quantum
field
is what created all of us?
Yes. That is the consensus in physics.
Okay, that's not the consensus in physics, because like I said, I spent some time looking at some of this, and even some of the top physicists don't agree with you, Tom. So
no,
I'll email you what I'm
extremely familiar with physics. So all the different theories, string theory, many worlds, multiverse, de Broglie, pilot wave theory, they're all quantum field theories. They all agree quantum field theory. Every single one of them is 100% quantum field theory.
I think sometimes people make up theories in the area of physics so that they can deny the consequences for the thing that the Bible teaches in Romans 1, which is that the truth of God has been revealed from what has been made, so they are without excuse. And
well, that's your bias.
Different ways of trying to get around that, but I think the Bible is very clear that we have knowledge of God. We have knowledge of his nature. We can just look around us and see what has been created and infer that there must be an intelligence.
Yeah, I understand your bias, but your bias is wrong. Quantum field theory was originally invented to explain things like the.
No, I'm not saying that all of it is, because not all of those physicists agree with you. They agree with me.
No.
Some of them are even Christians. Yes, they are.
No. So again, what I said was quantum field theory is accepted in all of the different versions.
Okay. Wait. But I'm saying that some of the theories have as their understanding, there's a causal relationship, and we haven't discovered what that causal relationship is. And some theories basically say, no, there's no causal relationship. Things are just random, blah, blah, blah. I'm saying that not all physicists agree on that issue, that there's no causal relationship.
Okay.
I'm saying
what I said is that all physicists agree quantum fields is the consensus of the base fundamental nature of reality. That's the part of
okay.
Now, wait. Stop. I know what you're going to say. So all of the different interpretations of what those fields are, string theory, many worlds, multiverse, all of that's hypothetical. We don't have a consensus on that. That's the next step. That's irrelevant. But there is a consensus. Quantum field theory is correct. And the reason that was invented has nothing to do with God. It has to do with empirical research of entanglement and particle wave duality. Wait. So I'm not done yet. So no, none of these were invented to eradicate God. Quantum field theory was invented to explain the evidence.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying the theories that basically say that there is no causal relationship in physics, that we can't explain things in terms of causal relationship. Therefore, there's no need for God. I'm saying that people that hold to those kinds of theories make it easier for them to deny what's really happening in space-time existence here today.
I don't know of any.
Therefore, the universe needs a cause. Even quantum foam.
Wait,
Tom,
I don't know of
wait, wait, wait,
anyone.
wait.
Wait, hold
Listen to
up.
this.
I don't
Wait,
know of
wait, wait.
anyone who doesn't
Quantum
have causes.
foam, quantum foam is not nothing.
Wait,
And
I don't know of anybody. There's no theories in physics that get rid of cause and effect. They all keep it. Some of them are emergent, but everyone still has cause and effect. I don't know of
right.
any that don't have cause and
So
effect.
there's cause effect, and you have to explain contingency. If there is a cause effect,
No.
you have to. You do, Tom.
No. The fact that there is causes and effects does not mean every effect needs to have a cause. The fact that there are causes and effects.
Everything that comes to be needs a cause, Tom.
Everything that
The
comes to be,
universe
yes,
came
that
to
part would
be,
be
therefore
true.
the
Not
universe.
really, but
Everything that comes to be needs a cause. If the
well,
universe
no. So that's false.
it needs a cause.
No, that's false. The fact that there are causes and effects, which every physicist agrees for the most part, does not mean that the principle of sufficient reason is true, that every cause or every effect
No,
needs
the
a cause.
principle of
That's false.
sufficient reason isn't true, because if God is an eternal being, he doesn't need a reason. He's not a self-caused being. He doesn't need a cause for his own existence. He exists eternally.
Well, I mean, I would agree. You don't need the. I'd agree the principle of sufficient reason is wrong, but that means that even though cause and effect is true, not every effect needs to be explained.
No. But if something is contingent and it's come to be, everything that comes to be needs the cause.
Well, no, again, that's what I mentioned earlier. The consensus in physics is that randomness is a force. So everything that comes to be does not need a cause.
Well,
also, brute facts are possible.
If you're interested, I'll send you the information that I, like, I'm not an expert in physics.
I am.
I did some research in it, and I'm glad to show you.
I am an expert in physics. I'm telling you right now that the expert consensus is that randomness is fundamental. There are uncaused events. They do not need a cause. That is the consensus. I am an expert in physics. I'm telling you this. I will send you the paper. I gave it to Jeff. Here's an academic peer-reviewed paper published in Cornell University that literally says verbatim, randomness is the consensus that there are uncaused events. I sent it to you. I sent it to Jeff. Jeff will send it to you. But that, and I sent you a paper from philosophy. In philosophy, brute facts are logically possible. It's basic philosophy. It's just it's literally on the facts page of Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, section 1.5, brute facts.
All these theories and ideas that you have, you admit you don't actually live that way. You live as though that there are causal relationships, and you can see cause and effect, and there's contingencies and things like that. You don't live. So in other words, your view is not really livable, because you don't understand that every effect must have a cause. And if the world is an effect, therefore the world must have a cause. And that cause.
Wait, I'm not understanding. I'm not understanding what you're saying here. So like, I agree randomness is fundamental. I agree. Does not mean literally everything is random. There are still causes. I can still pick up a glass and drink coffee. But the fact that quantum fields, that there's certain things in quantum fields are uncaused, does not violate this.
We don't understand. Not that there's not a causal relationship.
That's the first part of the question.
We don't understand. We just don't understand how they relate.
That's in the question I literally read to you. The first option is we just don't understand 6%. So that's like, nope, no one accepts that. The second one is it's a hidden variable, 0%. The third one is it's irreducible. It is a fundamental concept in nature.
Wait a second. So we determine what's true based on what the majority say. You just said 6% agree with me.
No,
but the rest disagree with you.
No, that's why after I said that, I gave you the evidence. The reason the consensus accept this are called no-go theorems, which have been empirically demonstrated to be correct.
Yeah.
So this is not just consensus. This is the consensus accept this position because the evidence indicates this position objectively.
Well,
and I sent you the academic papers that confirm
me, and I'll certainly can send to you what it is that I got from one of the leading physicists. I can't remember his name right now, but I did the research this last week, and it's like there is not a consensus. There is not a consensus. So whatever that paper said, somebody disagrees with that.
No. Because I know what you're referring to. I know the physics. I'm very well educated in this.
Okay, so who's the person I'm referring to?
Well, it could be lots of people could be you're talking about, but I know the paper you're referring to,
Yeah.
the part where there isn't a consensus is on which interpretation of quantum
Right.
mechanics is
Right.
correct. Is it the many worlds? Is it the Everett hypothesis? Is it the multiverse? Is it the string theory? Is it the de Broglie Empire wave theory? This is the part where there's no consensus. And I
Yeah.
agree there's no consensus on this part,
Yeah.
but this is a different question. This is a
Yes.
completely unrelated question. The question
Right.
we're asking is randomness fundamental and is quantum field theory true? There is complete consensus on both of those things. Both of the things I'm bringing to you, there is a massive consensus. And every physicist agrees on this, that there's a massive consensus.
Not every physicist agrees.
Every single physicist agrees there's a consensus on this topic.
I'll
Literally every physicist knows that the vast majority of physicists agree on this. This is extremely common knowledge. This is evolution levels of knowledge. 99% of people in the field agree with this because all of the evidence indicates it.
Yeah.
These two things I'm bringing to you are only things that everybody knows are the consensus.
What I'm trying to help you to see, Tom, is that it's reasonable to believe in God. It's reasonable to believe that Christianity is true, because if God exists, then miracles are possible. And then you have to look in history to see what Jesus did. But Jesus claimed to be, Jesus proved to be God. He lived a sinless life. He fulfilled prophecy. He died and rose from the dead. And there's evidence from history to back that up. And if you want some more of that kind of evidence, I'd be glad to send it to you.
Well, I would definitely consider if Jesus rose from the dead, that would be good evidence of Christianity. That is a novel, testable prediction. Jesus said, I will die and in 3 days rise. And if that happened, that'd be great evidence. But nothing in history, as far as I know, indicates that actually happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess this will be another time we can talk about that. But Gary Habermas has got a great book on the historical Jesus, where he talks about the evidence from secular society and the secular historians and things they said about Jesus. And the evidence is pretty overwhelming, actually.
I am familiar with his minimal facts approach.
Yeah. But wait, if you combine Gary Habermas's approach with my father's approach, I think this is one of the reasons I wanted to be on your program. I think it's a much stronger argument. And even Anthony Flew agreed that if a theistic God exists, then the evidence for the resurrection is stronger than even Gary was presenting. That's what Anthony Flew said in his
book. That's true.
Yes.
So like if you already proved God existed and God did stuff, and then like you see accounts of history of similar events happening, it's purely reasonable to say that here we know that this guy exists to do those things, so it's rational that he did those things. Yes, obviously.
Right. So let me close with this, because I know our time is up. I was actually 12 years ago, before I moved back to the U.S., I was on a panel discussion of religious people, and someone from the audience asked the most important question of the night, because there were different people from Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam and all different religions, and I represented Christianity. And somebody from the audience asked this question: how does your religion help you to stop to stop mankind from hating other human beings? And I thought, whoa, what a great question. I want to wait on this one. I don't want to say anything. I had an answer from a Christian point of view, but I wanted to see what other people would say. And no one said a word. And finally, here's what I said. The Bible teaches in Romans 8:11 that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is available to me as a Christian to transform my life so I can be a better father to my children, a better husband to my wife, and yes, so I can love those I naturally hate. And what I think is that Christianity provides the only hope, because it's the only religion that there is power that can transform your life from the inside out. And because that same power that raised Jesus from the dead, Christians believe, can transform our lives so that we are, we become a better father, better husband, a better person, and we love those we naturally hate. And that's not something that I can naturally do. It's something God's got to do inside of me. So that's why I think that once you've established that there's good evidence that Christianity is true, then the most important decision is, do I want to put my faith and trust in Christ? Do I want to allow Christ to come into my life and make those changes that only he can make? Because only God has the power to do those kind of things in our life.
Well, I would say that that's all natural. Like moral progress is one of the foundations of evidence of morality objectively for atheism. And so we see moral progress in every culture all over the world. As you gain in technology and intellect, your ability to morally see others grows and your moral significance of others grows. And so we actually see moral progress internally, naturally, without a God all the time. So I'd say that, yeah, that's a natural phenomenon we see all the time.
Well, hey, great talking with you.
Yeah, it was great talking to you too. Really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find out more about your work?
Yeah, the ngim.org. And also, I made a movie about my dad's life. It's called normgeislerthemovie.com. Because my father, wrestled with all these kind of questions. And so he went on a 20-year journey and got a PhD in philosophy and realized that Aquinas helped answer a lot of these questions, which is some of the information I'm presenting today from his book. So yeah, ngim.org, and then normgeislerthemovie.com is the other website, and people can find out about the movie.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.